The silence of midnight was thick and suffocating, the kind of silence that wrapped itself around you like a second skin. Yet, it wasn't the absence of noise that woke me. It was the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, measured. They echoed down the long corridor outside my bedroom, but when I glanced at the clock, I knew the truth. There was no one else in the house. My heart pounded as I sat up, eyes straining against the dark, listening. The footsteps came again, a deliberate, unnerving rhythm. They weren't hurried or frantic, but they felt wrong. A chill crept down my spine, my mind racing to find a logical explanation. I tried to shake it off. It must be the house settling, I told myself. An old home like this creaks and groans all the time. But the sound was too distinct, too human, and it was getting closer. As I lay frozen in bed, the footsteps stopped right outside my door. A month before that night, I had moved to a small, rural town, far from the noise of the city. I needed peace, a quiet place to finish my writing project, and the old house at the edge of the woods seemed perfect. It was cheap, spacious, and isolated, with a charm that seemed pulled straight from a forgotten era. But the locals, they weren't too eager to welcome me. "That house, miss," the old woman at the grocery store had whispered, her eyes wide with concern. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." I brushed off her warnings. Superstitions, I thought. Every small town had them. Ghost stories meant to scare the newcomers. The woods behind the house had a strange allure. During the day, the sunlight filtered through the trees in delicate shafts, giving the forest an almost ethereal glow. But at night, those same trees seemed to close in on themselves, their branches forming twisted, skeletal shapes. And there was something about the wind that whispered through them. It didn't howl or wail, but it spoke in low, guttural murmurs, like someone was trying to communicate with you if you just listened hard enough. I avoided the woods after dark. Everyone did. I waited, barely daring to breathe, as the footsteps outside my bedroom door lingered in silence. The door creaked slightly, as if someone, or something, was standing just inches away, deciding whether to enter. But when I mustered the courage to get out of bed and fling the door open, there was nothing. No one. My pulse raced. This wasn't my imagination. In the days that followed, the footsteps became more frequent. I would hear them at odd hours, always at night. The same deliberate, pacing rhythm. My first instinct was to rationalize it. I had read too many ghost stories, let my mind wander into dark places. But when the footsteps began circling the bed at night, stopping just short of where I lay, my nerves frayed. The house, with its heavy walls and creaky floors, no longer felt like a sanctuary. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't write. My mind was consumed by the sound of those dreadful footsteps. One night, after hearing them again, I reached out to a local historian, desperate to know more about the house's past. "The house you're living in has a history," the historian began, his voice grim over the phone. "Back in the late 1800s, it belonged to a family, husband, wife, and 2 young daughters. The father, Charles Montgomery, was a respected man in the community, but as the years went on, something changed in him. He became paranoid, convinced someone, or something, was watching him. I listened intently, every word sending chills through me. He would hear footsteps at night," the historian continued, "just like you've described. His paranoia grew until one night, in a fit of madness, he murdered his family. Afterward, he claimed it wasn't his fault, that the footsteps made him do it. He was executed, but the house, well, the locals believe it's still haunted by the spirits of his victims. Or worse, by whatever drove Charles mad. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Was I experiencing the same madness? That night, after the historian's chilling revelation, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, Every rustle of the wind sent my nerves into a frenzy. I paced the house, checking the windows, the locks, telling myself I was safe. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. At around midnight, the footsteps returned. This time, they were accompanied by something else, a faint whisper. It wasn't coming from the house. It was coming from the woods. Curiosity, or perhaps madness, took hold of me. Grabbing a flashlight, I made my way to the back door, the cold night air biting at my skin as I stepped outside. The whispering grew louder as I approached the edge of the forest. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a shadow. It moved between the trees, too quickly for me to make out any details. My heart raced, but I couldn't stop myself. I stepped deeper into the woods, the whispers now surrounding me, louder and more insistent. They weren't in English, but I could feel the intent behind them. They were calling me. In the center of the woods, I stumbled upon something strange, an old, crumbling well. Its stones were covered in moss, the ground around it undisturbed, as if no one had set foot there in years. The whispers were loudest here, circling me like a breeze. I shone the flashlight down into the well, half expecting to see nothing but darkness. But there, at the bottom, was a figure. It was hunched, shrouded in shadow, its eyes glowing faintly. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The figure slowly lifted its head, and a raspy voice echoed up from the well. "Why did you come?" I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The figure moved, and I ran. I didn't look back until I was safe inside the house. The door bolted shut behind me. My body trembled, the cold seeping into my bones. Whatever was out there, it had seen me, and I had a sinking feeling it wasn't going to let me go. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and terror. The footsteps inside the house grew louder, more insistent, as if they were no longer content with just watching. Doors would slam shut on their own, objects moved from one place to another, and the whispers, oh, the whispers, they followed me wherever I went. I stopped going into the woods altogether, but it didn't matter. Whatever I had encountered by the well had followed me home. Desperate for answers, I visited an old psychic in town. She listened quietly as I recounted everything: the footsteps, the whispers, the figure in the well. "You've disturbed something ancient," she said gravely. "The well. It's a gateway, a portal to the other side. The figure you saw, it's been waiting, and now that it's seen you, it will try to pull you in." My heart sank. What can I do? There's no escaping it. "Not entirely," she said, her voice filled with sorrow. "But you can buy yourself time. You must perform a ritual, one that will seal the gateway. But it's dangerous. And if you fail—" I didn't need her to finish the sentence. With the psychic's instructions in hand, I gathered the items needed for the ritual: candles, salt, and an old incantation written in a language I didn't understand. I had to return to the well. As night fell, I steeled myself for what was to come. The woods were darker than I remembered, the trees looming like silent sentinels. The whispers began as soon as I stepped into the clearing, more insistent, more aggressive. The figure in the well was waiting for me, its glowing eyes fixed on mine. I started the ritual, my hands trembling as I drew a circle of salt around the well. The incantation spilled from my lips, though I wasn't sure if I was pronouncing the words correctly. The figure began to rise from the well, its form becoming more solid with each passing second. Panic gripped me. The ritual wasn't working. Just as the figure reached the top of the well, I finished the incantation. For a moment, everything went still. The whispers stopped, the wind died down, and the figure froze. Then, with a deafening screech, it vanished, pulled back into the well as if by some unseen force. The ground around the well rumbled, and the stone structure collapsed inward, sealing whatever lay beneath it. I stood there, breathless, my heart pounding in my chest. It was over, or so I thought. As I turned to leave, I heard it again, the sound that had haunted me for weeks. A single, deliberate footstep, right behind me. If you want to hear more terrifying tales like this, don't forget to check out our next video, Horror Stories to Keep You Up at Night, by clicking on the end screen. Stay tuned for more chilling encounters that will make you question every sound you hear in the dark.